For the delay in the coffee being served. He should be back here any second now and have something out there to warm us up a little bit. Here we go right now. Great. So, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jack Kinn. I'm one of the myriad of volunteers, thousands of engineers who are volunteer workers in the vineyard of IEEE. And I'm here to act as your MC briefly this morning and to introduce the main speaker this morning. I'm happy to see you here, especially given the weather conditions, etc. And hopefully by the time we're done, the snow will not be that bad and we'll still be able to make it to our respective jobs, etc. Before I go any further, I would like to introduce to you some of my colleagues here at the table so that you are aware who they are. You've probably met them on the way in, but just, just in case you didn't have that opportunity. On my right is Dr. Richard Gowen, who is the president of IEEE. And I will say more about Dick, and he will say more to you very shortly. On my left is Eric Herz, who is the Executive Director and General Manager of IEEE and its Chief Staff Officer. And further on down the road is Leo Fanning over there, who heads up the Washington office of IEEE. We're more than well aware this is 1984, George Orwell notwithstanding, etc. And I'm sure this year is going to mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people as time goes on. One of the things I'm sure we'll find out hopefully by the end of this, or the beginning of next week, is that the Redskins have won the Super Bowl 2 times in a row. But I can assure you that 1984 has a lot of meaning as well for IEEE because it marks the 100th anniversary of the creation of the Institute. And in commemoration of that event, we have planned a number of activities during the year 1984, one of which we will be describing to you very briefly this morning. Specifically, on February 22nd and 23rd, here in Washington, we will be holding a technological policy conference. Concomitant with that will be a microelectronics exhibition at the Smithsonian Institute. And as a starter for that technological policy conference, we are planning a symbolic foot race. And participants in that foot race, we hope to have from the press, as well as from the Congress, and some of our own volunteers. So I invite all of you who have any interest in jogging, foot racing, etc., to sign up with us at the end of this session or at any other time and get into the beginning of that technological policy conference. The primary reason we're here today is to listen to some thoughts that our president, Dick Gowen, has concerning the future impact on our lives, really, of our educational system, directions it seems to be going in, and directions in which perhaps changes ought to be made. And I don't want to take away from anything that Dick will say, so I'm not going to go into the topic that he will discuss any further. Suffice to say that in your press kit is a briefing on the subject, along with some material on the press conference itself, on the technological policy conference itself, and background and biographical material on Dr. Gowen. Very briefly, Dr. Gowen did his undergraduate work at Rutgers and obtained his graduate degrees at Iowa State University. He is currently Vice President and Dean of Engineering at the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. Prior to assuming that post, he had been working as a researcher at RCA Laboratories and was professor and deputy head of the Department of Electrical Engineering at the U.S. Air Force Academy. And among his many accomplishments is one in which he introduced the first electrical engineering program at the Academy and organized the joint NASA Department of Defense Space Instrumentation Laboratory, which supported the NASA Space Medical Program. In addition, that laboratory also supported the recent Apollo Skylab missions. He is a fellow of the IEEE and of a number of other scientific organizations. He has chaired numerous committees and boards within the IEEE, and as you can well appreciate, has been a very active member of IEEE and contributor to the welfare not only of the electrical engineering profession, but the United States as well. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Dr. Richard Gowen.
Thank you, Jack. By way of quick remark, I would comment that from part of the country I come from, a snowflake or two is considered normal. And that's out in Rapid City, South Dakota, in which we are kind of prepared to see snow. And I understand we have some concern about the snow coming on. This morning I'd like to talk to you from the position of IEEE President. And the Institute of Electrical Electronics Engineers is an international organization with 250,000 members. We're fortunate in which we have members throughout all elements of the world. And our concern is that we find some problems arising in a particularly close portion of our membership, and those are the members in the United States. So my remarks this morning are really oriented towards concerns with math and science, with education as a whole in this country, in the United States. You know, we find ourselves in a position now that we're very honored to look back over our first century. A century ago, leaders of this country founded the IEEE, and they founded it for technical exchange. The first board of directors of the IEEE, then the American Institute of Electrical Electronics Engineers, AIEE, the predecessor organization, was founded using the technology of the age. The first president was Novin Green, who was president of Western Union Telegraph Company. And as part of that original organization, there were some new upstarts in technology, but joined within the traditional technologies of that age. And you know the names of those upstarts: Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Alva Edison, and others of that type. And that was the roots that we in the IEEE trace back as our founding. Within that organization, we began to develop the technological breadth, the depth that we enjoy today, the change that has changed the way of life of this whole world. This year we are celebrating our centennial, and we're very proud of the many accomplishments of this last 100 years. But frankly, as I look to the future, I'm very concerned. And I'm very concerned about the technological literacy, about the development, about math and science education, about where we are today. 200 years ago, Thomas Jefferson very carefully noted to us that if you're going to have a democracy, people must be prepared to participate in the democracy. And we find that we're in the midst of a technological explosion. That technological explosion is giving us new ways of life every second. We find that the development of information is upon us. We're in the information age. We're in the age of computers. We're in the age of very rapidly changing gadgets, widgets. Our way of life is changing. Now, against that background, I'm concerned that this great nation of the United States is unprepared. It is unprepared to meet the challenge of the technological explosion of this age. I think we actually are falling behind in the race for technological literacy. And I'm concerned that unless action is taken immediately, we will fall further and further behind. You know, we find ourselves today in which there are more people than ever who know how to turn on a computer. And I'm very pleased for that and very thankful that that occurs. But ladies and gentlemen, we should not be dissuaded. We should not be held back. We should not be misled by the fact that although you can turn the computer on and it'll play a game, that is not using technology. The real need is for people who understand how our computers, how our technologies work, and what they can do with them. And my concern is that today, the state of math and science education in the United States borders on a national disgrace. There are those who would argue that, in fact, it is a national disgrace. But I suggest to you that we received many, many reports in the last 18 months. And those reports over and over again point out to us that there's a lack of excellence within our math and science education. They point out very carefully that action must be taken now. Now, you know we're in a very interesting time in this country. It's a time of election. It's a time in which we receive many, many discussions of this issue, and it's in the national news. It's an item of great prominence. But frankly, it seems as though we get more election rhetoric than we get action. And you've heard many, many of our candidates for distinguished office point out what they will do if elected. My concern is that action must occur now. We cannot afford to wait. That brings me to the consideration that the engineers and scientists of organizations such as the IEEE must come to the fore. And this morning I would like to issue a call. And that call is that the great giant of engineering and science of this world, of this nation, focus upon the needs for technological literacy and focus upon the needs for math and science education. My call is that the engineers and scientists of the United States awaken. Awaken to the problem of technological literacy and awaken to the problem of the state of our math and science education as it exists in the United States today. A few years ago, we witnessed the effect of a grapefruit-sized satellite that was launched into space, Sputnik. You recall what that did? That shook the foundations of education in this country. You know, today there are no Sputniks. And frankly, it would be easier if there were. Because our problems today are that the changes that are occurring so slowly on the scale that there are no explosions of Sputniks, that we're not aware of them. We are not aware of the lost markets, of the lost opportunities that are occurring because of our lack of preparation in math and science education. Recently, I had occasion to be in China, and I was leading an IEEE delegation for technical exchange to the People's Republic of China. And as part of that delegation, I met with a number of Chinese leaders. And one of the managers asked me a question. The question went like this. The question was, what will the United States do to regain its position in the consumer electronics industry, its position of competition, its leadership that it once enjoyed? It lost that position, as you well know, to our allies and our friends in Japan. We find today that what has occurred is that we no longer are able to compete in that marketplace. My answer to the Chinese went like this, in which I commented that we've observed that once the marketplace has been lost to a very, very competent competitor, one who is able to produce a product at the right price, you don't regain that marketplace back. In fact, the goal is to create new marketplaces. And in the United States today, our orientation is to use technology to jump ahead, to create the new products. You know, as I was speaking to the Chinese, there was a gnawing feeling in the back of my mind. And that feeling was, will we really be able to compete effectively? And as I observed the efforts in this country to tackle our math and science education problems, I am very concerned that we may not be able to compete. The time for action must happen now. And my feeling is that action must take place within the people who understand the problems of math and science. And those people are the engineers and scientists of the United States, of the world. My urgency, my call, my challenge is that the engineers and scientists speak out and help our leaders of this great nation understand what the problems are. You know, I'm a very positive type of person. I'm an optimist. And I believe that once we understand the problems, something will be done about it. But my concern today is that the problems of technological literacy, the need for math and science, are so special, are so ingrained within the way we do our business in technology, that many people do not understand it. Now, those of us who are involved in engineering, we appreciate the need for taking the discoveries of science and moving those discoveries through the development of a technology into the marketplace. That's the role of the engineer. The engineer is the person who works with the scientist and ultimately brings a product out that can compete. You know, today we find the leaders of engineering industries pointing out to us very carefully that they need more engineers than we've ever graduated to date. As a matter of fact, we're urged to begin to look towards a 15, 16 to 20% increase in the number of engineers who are being educated today. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid we can't do that. Because I'm afraid that our young people who are being educated in school today are not being prepared in the math and science that are necessary for them to go on to be the engineers of the future. Our math and science education is such that, in fact, we are not educating our children in math and science. We're turning them off. We're discouraging them. By the time they come to college, they've already lost interest in the technological future of this country. Now, what can be done? I had occasion the other day to visit with a gentleman on the telephone, an old friend. As a matter of fact, some 25 years ago, we taught together at the Air Force Academy. And the gentleman I visited with at that time was a major. He was a fighter pilot, an electrical engineer. Today, he's a mathematics teacher in Oklahoma. And what he has done is concentrated upon how can we reorient algebra as it's taught in our high schools in this country. And he's reoriented a series of textbooks that will relate to the retraining of individuals, to give them confidence, to give them an orientation towards technology. Now, I cite that as one example of something that can be done. I also cite as an example that in every nook and cranny of this great nation, there are engineers and scientists who perhaps need to leave the computers that we work with each day, who need to leave our design benches, who need to leave our laboratories. We need to come into the public arena. It's important that the engineers and scientists speak out. Go to the local school boards. Go to the local educators. Go to the local leaders of government and meet with those leaders of government and share with them the knowledge, the urgency that as engineers and scientists we have. The knowledge that we have of the need for training people to be able to use math and science. Now is the time for action. You can say, gee, why all of a sudden should we worry about engineering and scientists being involved in math and science education? My concern is that it is not an easy problem. It is a problem that will take very, very concerted effort in all parts. I would like to ask that all of the professional societies, those societies like the IEEE, the many scientific societies of this country, I'd like to see all of the professional societies focus upon the problem in math and science education. I would urge that the professional societies form task force, form groups, to openly involve themselves in seeking a linkage of the future, a linkage that will help math and science education improve. I hesitate to say this, but I'm afraid it is very true. The importance of math and science education is so vital to this country that as engineers and scientists, we cannot afford to leave that education in the hands of educators. It is vital that the engineers and scientists of this country bring to the table the expertise that they have, to work with the educational leaders of this country so that in fact we do develop a new approach to math and science education. We need an approach that will take the young people in our classrooms today and help them see the future that technology brings to this world, to help them be prepared so that they can go forward with confidence and enter into our colleges. We need to develop a curriculum different than that which we have, a curriculum which gives confidence to our children. We need to prepare a curriculum that prepares them to enter into the halls of science so that they can get that knowledge necessary to be the engineers of the future. And you may wonder, how are we going to do that? How much money will that take? How much effort will that take? And my call this morning is for people to begin to do what this nation has done since its inception. That is to use the brain power that exists for solving problems. I have occasion to be very honored to be in an institution in a state in which we find ourselves 48th on the per capita funding that goes to education. Well, quite frankly, as you recently reported, we found ourselves 14th on the ACT scores. And you ask, how did that happen? You need to put more money in to get better scores. But somehow that doesn't seem to make sense. My suggestion to you is that the answer is not always money. The answer in part is the innovation that is within people. I'm concerned that we need to begin to use the brain power of this country that resides within our engineers and scientists to come over and help the education problem. As an example, in my institution in South Dakota, we have created a computer in a briefcase. It's a kit. Our freshmen build their own computer kit. Now that computer kit was developed within our institution.